The president of my HOA blocked my barn door with her brand new Bentley. So I fired up my tractor and did what had to be done. Hey everyone, I'm your name. I make real-life story videos where chaos, karma, and a little country wisdom come together. Every week, I bring you stories that'll make you laugh, think, and sometimes just shake your head in disbelief. This one is a wild ride you're not gonna forget. I've lived on the same patch of land for over 15 years now, tucked right where the pavement ends and the gravel begins. My little farm had always been my world. Early mornings, the smell of hay and diesel, the sound of metal gates swinging open. It's not glamorous, but it's honest. I had a few goats, a couple of horses, 2 stubborn rescue dogs, and a barn that had seen more sunrises than most folks in this HOA-laced suburb ever would. Things were simple, hard but simple. I didn't care much for HOA meetings, manicured lawns, or the kinds of neighbors who hold rulers to grass height. My closest neighbor was a retired mechanic who taught me more about engines than any manual ever could. We swapped tools more than words, and that suited me just fine. Peace was easy to come by around here. But all of that started to unravel the day the neighborhood line expanded. One zoning map later, and according to the city, I was now part of the Oak Hills Community Association. Just like that, I had new neighbors, new guidelines, and one pristine mailbox stuffed full of warnings and pamphlets about how to enhance curb appeal. I didn't pay it much attention, figuratively and literally. I was too busy actually working a real piece of land. That is, until she showed up. The woman who would turn my peaceful day-to-day into a dangerously ridiculous game of control. They call her Karen. I didn't know it then, but I was about to find out exactly what happens when the wrong person gets a little too much power and a shiny new Bentley to show it off. She thought I wouldn't do it. She thought I'd back down. But when I saw that Bentley parked across my barn door, something in me snapped. I met her for the first time on a Wednesday. Typical sunny morning, birds going about their business, and me just doing mine. Topping off water for the goats and checking the lower fence posts. That's when I saw the SUV. Glossy, black, idling too long right by the edge of my driveway. Out steps this woman in oversized sunglasses, a clipboard in hand, and a not-so-friendly kind of smile stretched across her face. She strode right up to me like she owned the dirt under her heels. Introduced herself sharply. "Hi, I'm Karen, president of the Oak Hills Community Association." The way she said president sounded like she expected me to salute. I wiped my hands on a rag and offered a handshake. She didn't take it. Instead, she glanced over my shoulder and made a face like she'd just sniffed spoiled milk. "That red trim on your barn," she said, nose wrinkling. "It's not HOA approved. We'll need to have that changed per design guidelines." That was the first warning shot. I tried to explain, calmly, respectfully, that my property had existed long before the HOA was even formed, and technically, I was grandfathered in under previous zoning. She didn't care. She just smiled tighter and said, "Let's not make this harder than it needs to be. You're in the community now. We all play by the same rules." Then she left just like that. No wave, no smile. Just the soft tap of her heels and the faint scent of expensive perfume burned into the wind. Over the next few weeks, it escalated. Notes on my gate. Official-looking letters about noise violations when I ran the tractor too early. A complaint about my dogs barking, even though they only barked when something or someone was on the property. She was watching me, constantly. Binoculars, drive-bys, even standing across the road and pretending to jog. People like that, they don't jog, they spy. It was clear real fast. I wasn't just some name on her list. I was her personal mission, and this wasn't about rules. It was about control. Control she thought she had. Spoiler alert, she didn't. If someone blocked access to your animals out of pure spite, what would you do? Because when it happened to me, let's just say, I didn't call a tow truck. First, I thought maybe she'd get bored and move on. Maybe I was just the new square on her HOA bingo card. I kept my head down, stuck to my chores, acted respectful, and hoped she'd just find someone else to nitpick. But Karen wasn't interested in peace. She was interested in winning, and for some reason, beating me became her personal project. Started small. Every few days, I'd find another violation notice zip-tied to my gate. One said my fence posts were too rustic. Another flagged my barn as an unregistered structure, like it had popped up overnight. I even got fined for excessive noise during community quiet hours at 7:30 in the morning. I don't know about you, but the sun doesn't wait for HOA quiet hours, and neither do hungry animals. I tried calling, got voicemail. I emailed the HOA board, got redirected to Karen every time. And neighbors? Most of them were quiet. Some whispered that they'd had their own issues with her, but no one wanted to get banned from book club or have their mailbox tampered with, so they stayed out of it. Understandable. She wasn't running a neighborhood, she was running a regime. Then it got worse. One day, I opened my barn to find a laminated violation notice nailed, right to the middle of the door, in bold red letters, unauthorized agricultural activity. That barn's been feeding livestock longer than the HOAs even existed. You can imagine how that sat with me. So I paid her a visit, walked right up to her house, knocked calmly on that oversized, freshly painted front door, the one with 3 security cameras aimed right at the stoop. She opened it slowly, arms crossed before I said a word. I told her, plain and polite, "You're crossing boundaries now. I've lived here a long time without problems. I don't want trouble. I just want to be left alone." She smiled, icy hollow, and said, "This neighborhood needs order. If you can't respect that, I'll make sure someone does." I remember standing there, stunned. Not by the words, but the way she said them, like this was a chess game she already believed she'd won. What she didn't realize was, she just made it personal. And I don't lose on my land. It started with a letter from the HOA, then the warnings, then the fines. But when Karen rolled up in her Bentley and crossed the final line, I knew I had to respond. It was a Wednesday morning, just like the last time things changed. I stepped outside, coffee in hand, ready to start my chores. Everything looked normal, until I turned the corner toward the barn, and stopped cold. There, parked directly in front of my barn doors, was a gleaming white Bentley, polished so bright it practically reflected the sky. 2 doors, long hood, tires turned in like it knew it didn't belong here, blocking the only entrance I used to feed my animals, get my tools, and, do the work I do every single day. At first, I thought, maybe someone got lost, maybe someone broke down, maybe this was a mistake. Then I saw the note under the windshield wiper, neatly printed, laminated. Of course, since you can't follow community rules, enjoy a taste of being limited. Let's revisit your livestock situation soon. HOA President Karen. My first reaction wasn't anger. It was disbelief. She actually did it. She'd gone from warnings and write-ups to full-on obstruction. This wasn't just petty anymore. This was personal sabotage. I tried calling her, straight to voicemail. Again, next call went to the HOA board. And guess who answered every line? Karen, or someone who conveniently transferred me back to her. I asked her calmly to move the car. She simply said, "It's not on your deeded driveway. It's common ground. Temporary inconvenience. That's all." Temporary? Tell that to the hungry animals waiting in my pasture. Tell that to the tractor I now couldn't back out. Heck, tell that to basic common sense. I went back to the house and sat on the porch for a minute. Thought about calling the sheriff, but I knew what they'd say. It's civil. Take it to small claims court. Don't escalate. And sitting there, sipping half-warm coffee, I looked at that Bentley gleaming in the sun, and something in me changed. I didn't yell. I didn't panic. Because when someone blocks your barn, they're not just blocking a door. They're attacking your way of life, your work, your peace. So you do what any good farmer would do. You remove the obstacle, one way or another. She blocked my barn with a Bentley, so I crushed it with a tractor. Simple math. I gave her a chance. I really did. All I wanted was for her to move the Bentley. Just back it up 2 feet, and I'd pretend it never happened. Go back to feeding the animals, fixing the gate, and minding my own business. But she didn't move it. Not that day. Not the next. 2 entire mornings went by. That car sitting in front of my barn like some smug, polished trophy. I ended up crawling through a side window to toss feed from the back wall, but that wasn't sustainable. I'd built that barn for efficiency, for one entrance, not to be playing a daily game of farmyard gymnastics. And the worst part? She watched. I swear to you, she'd stand across the road with her little fluffy white dog and designer sunglasses, acting like she was just out for a morning stroll. All while smirking at the road she'd just blocked, almost daring me to do something, anything. That's when I knew. She wanted a reaction. She didn't expect restraint. She expected me to yell, curse, maybe damage the car in a fit of rage. But that's not who I am. So I waited. I wanted to be sure. No movement. No attempts to apologize. Not even a neighbor stepping in. No one wanted to get involved. Fine. Next morning, I skipped my usual coffee. Walked the perimeter. Everything was quiet. Even the birds sounded like they were holding their breath. Then I walked to the barn. Looked at that Bentley one last time. I didn't take a hammer. I didn't grab a wrench. I got on my tractor. Old, red, loud when it's cold, and strong as ever. The same one I'd used to build this place up and keep it moving through every storm. I pulled it around slowly from the back side of the barn, lined it up at a clean diagonal to the Bentley's front bumper. And then I sat there, just me, the engine humming, and the quiet kind of calm you feel right before something big happens. I took one breath. If she wanted to block the barn with her car, I'd show her what happens when you block a working man's land. Because respect isn't something earned with a luxury badge. It's earned by not pushing the wrong person too far. You're probably wondering why a Bentley ended up looking like an accordion in my barnyard. Well, let me take you back to the real reason. There's a certain silence that happens right before steel meets steel. Not a peaceful kind, more like the air stiffens. Even the wind held back like it didn't want to interfere. I eased off the brake. The tractor rolled forward, slow and steady. Not a charge, just purpose. I wasn't aiming to total it. I wasn't crazy, but I was going to move it. And in my world, when something blocks vital work, sometimes you use what you've got. The front steel guard of the tractor nudged into the front panel beneath that shiny Bentley grille. First, just pressure. Then came the sound. A slow, sickening creak. Metal bending. Plastic snapping. A low, expensive groan like the car itself realized what was happening way too late. I inched forward again. The front bumper crunched and shifted. Not wrecked beyond use, but definitely far from pretty. It wasn't violent. It was controlled. Quiet justice. Then I heard the scream. "What are you doing?" There she was, Karen, storming out from behind hedges in a floral robe, slippers half on, phone in hand, her dog barking like it just saw a ghost. She ran toward the fence but stopped short, too stunned to even come closer. I calmly parked the tractor, stepped off, dusted my hands. "You're blocking my barn," I said, just loud enough. "Told you, things get moved when they're in the way." She stared at the car, mouth open, phone shaking in her hand. "You're finished," she hissed. I nodded once and walked away. "Finished? No, ma'am. That was just the beginning of the end. And karma? Karma had 4 wheels, a dented hood, and it was finally out of my way. Nothing says respect my authority like parking your $250,000 car in front of someone's barn. Unless, of course, that someone owns a tractor. She called the sheriff. Of course she did. Within an hour, there was a cruiser parked where the Bentley used to be. The same spot she had claimed was public access. Officers asked me a few calm, polite questions. I wasn't rude or defensive. I told them exactly what happened and took full responsibility. I even showed them the laminated note she left on my windshield and the dozen photos I'd taken in the past 2 days of her Bentley blocking the barn. One of the officers nodded and said, "Well, that's a first." Karen was not amused. She was pacing near her car, dramatic as always, shouting things like, "I want him arrested," and "This man is dangerous." But here's the thing, the officers knew local farm laws. You block access to livestock in a working area, That's not just rude, that can count as animal endangerment. I told them I couldn't reach my feed, couldn't open my barn, and they agreed. They didn't arrest anyone, but they did give her a pretty stern warning and asked her to consider how she'd like it if someone parked a tractor in front of her front door. She screeched, "This isn't over." Spoiler, it very much was. And then something amazing happened. The next week, I started getting calls from neighbors, quiet ones, people who had been harassed by Karen too. One old vet told me she fined him for his American flag being too faded. Another got cited for a mailbox that didn't match community tone. Turns out I wasn't the only one she'd bullied. I was just the first to say, "Enough." At the next HOA board meeting, which I didn't attend, but I heard plenty about, a group of residents presented a motion to remove Karen as HOA president. They brought evidence, stories, and even a printed photo of her Bentley blocking the barn. The board voted. Karen was out. Later that week, I got a knock on my door. It wasn't her, thank goodness, but a younger couple who'd just been voted in to help run the new HOA. They brought me a fruit basket. I kid you not, along with a handwritten apology and a promise that we're going to clean up the mess she left. I accepted it, graciously. It wasn't about revenge. Not really. It was about respect. I didn't crush that car out of spite. I crushed it because it was the only thing left in the way of my animals, of my work, of everything I had built with my own hands. Karen thought she was untouchable behind status and rules. But the truth is simple. You don't block a barn and expect nothing to happen, especially not when the man who owns it has a tractor and a whole lot of patience.